always liked MiniArt box arts. The artist, Andrei Karashuk, also works for MasterBox and Bronco, and maybe even more companies I don't know of. All figures of this set are depicted and the poses looked interesting enough for me to buy it. For the Say Cheese Dio I need the driver and I want to use the Feldgendarmerie with the hatchet. On the short sides we see the usual things. The box illustration, the kit's name and number, and the scale. One long side gives us some information on the set in English, Russian and Ukrainian. On the other side there's the same in German plus name and address of the German importer for MiniArt products. And of course there's some advertising for 2 more figure sets. Here we have the sprue. It was cut in 2 by the manufacturer. This review is also an experiment. I wasn't happy with the way my pics turned out lately. I can only take pics as long as there's daylight. The green cutting mat made for strange lighting effects. Sand-colored styrene looked weird. Light grey plastic caused problems too now and then. As you can see, I used black cardboard as background for our pics. That made it possible to use less light and still achieve a better contrast to make the details pop out. Although I like the result, I'm not fully convinced yet. Please let me know what you think about it in the comments section. If you don't like it, please tell me why. I'm trying to improve the quality of my pics, so I'll appreciate your honest words. I'll use white cardboard for the next inbox review to find out which is better. Here we have the parts for the officer. At first sight they look quite nice. Let's zoom in now. The face has a rather unfriendly expression. I guess I would like it better if I hadn't just reviewed the Tamiya military field police set. The difference is, well, incredible. At least they stopped doing the seam lines across forehead, nose and mouth. The side views reveal something between seam line and flesh. It's not that easy to tell where the ear ends and the seam line begins. You want to check twice before you do the Vincent van Gogh. If you're looking for hair, you'll be disappointed. He and his comrades in this set are skinheads. The body looks quite nice. The Feldgendarme's gorget is detailed enough to be recognizable. Belt and buckle aren't bad, although the belt's end is missing. I can't make out what the badge on his left pocket might be. It could be anything, so you want to check which badges military policemen were awarded. We'll look at his collar badges in a second. For MiniArt figures, this seam line isn't too bad. It won't be more work than usual to remove it. The same goes for this seam line. But now for the collar badges. Oh, what MiniArt made of them. My advice is to sand them off and use decals instead. It'll be very difficult to paint them in the correct shape here. These, well, things don't even come close to what German collar badges look like. There's nothing but the button on the shoulder badges. It can be a good thing if you want to give figures the rank you need for a specific scene. The back doesn't show any features like, for example, the seams of German uniform jackets. That's a bit disappointing. Now we'll take a look at arms and hands. The sleeves show nice folds and the MP badge on the left arm is clearly visible. But the seam line is also visible from this perspective. That indicates that it'll be very pronounced. I'm afraid that it's rather flash than a seam line. I wasn't mistaken and I'm already scared to death to take a closer look at the hands. The right hand isn't too bad. The seam line is strongly visible, but the fingers aren't damaged. A bit more work than necessary, but nothing that would cause headaches. Left hand and the documents are one part. That makes it look much more realistic than if there were 2 parts we'd have to glue together. The seam line could be less pronounced, but at least it doesn't go across the fingers. The thumb is what worries me. I took 5 pics from different angles to show you that it doesn't really look like anything human. According to the box art, this figure is wearing gloves, but it's still a strange looking thumb. If I painted it orange, it would look like a carrot. If I painted it dark brown, well, we'll look at the driver's left hand in a couple of minutes. There are documents he's giving to the officer, so both hands will look similar. Anyway, this thumb could use some sanding for a better shape. The legs appear to be nicely done, although I missed the typical riding boots as they were used by German officers, and as they are shown on the box illustration. These come closer to the Knobelbecher boots used by NCOs and enlisted men. The folds are a bit over the top because the boots weren't made of soft leather. I'd have to guess if the sculpting was bad or if the tooling was. Maybe the molds weren't clean. Anyway, that doesn't look good. There'll be some sanding necessary to give the boot the correct shape. The seam lines aren't too bad and appear to be easy to remove. Here we have the officer's cap. It isn't bad, but the Tamiya one I just reviewed is much better. The seam line is very pronounced and the visor must be sanded into shape. Next item is the map case. This is a very nice part and it'll look great after removing the seam line and painting it. Last accessory part for the officer is the Walter PPK holster. It's nicely done, and although there's no stitching like on the Tamiya one, there's nothing to complain about. Next figure is the driver, and since I'll use him, I'll take a real close look. I'll use a hornet head because of the facial expression, but I would do the same if that wasn't the reason. The eyes look dead. The usual MiniArt seam lines. They could save a lot of money if they took better care of their molds. All that styrene is a waste. The body looks quite okay. If the guy's sitting in a truck, there won't be much visible. I'll use him as driver for the Opel Admiral with open top. These badly sculpted cowl badges will have to go. I like the back. It'll fit neatly into the front seat. Here are arms and hands. We take a closer look, but I guess you can already make out the flesh on his right hand. I'm sorry, but I can't say anything nice about this hand. I'm not willing to remove all that flesh. It's unbelievable that a manufacturer is bold enough to sell this set. I never saw anything like this before. At least I can't remember. No, I'm fed up with it. This hand is as bad as that of the officer. Maybe I'll use the arms, but these hands are crap. Real crap. The boots are badly molded again. There's a lot of flesh on the legs. Removing it will rather be carving than scraping it off. The side cap will be usable after a good cleanup. The right side shows what I mean with a good cleanup. Here's a Feldgendarme with a traffic baton. I'm speechless, not because I like the face. I never liked molded on straps for helmets. The eagle on the gorget isn't symmetrical and looks odd. The belt's buckle looks strange too. There are very pronounced seam lines to remove. The gunsling has to be completed. The strap for the gas mask case is going nowhere. It might be a good idea to hollow out these areas of the coat to make them look more realistic. I'm really sorry, but I can't go on without the massive use of swear words. The sprue gate on the batten's handle is quite large and requires careful handling. Since it's bent, you could as well remove it and make a new one from wire. Since the chap is wearing a raincoat, the legs don't need any details. The boots aren't better or worse than those we saw before. Here's a two-part raincoat. The details are soft but don't look bad. The seam line needs to be removed carefully to make the parts fit to one another and the legs and body. There are a couple of buttons. The distances between the buttons are different and that makes them look odd. And this is what it looks like when parts are sculpted with great attention to detail. Yes, the Tamiya set was more expensive, but that alone can't explain the differences. The two parts are thick enough to make removing excess styrene possible if they don't fit around the legs. That's good to know. I guess the helmet will look good after removing the seam line. I said it a couple of times before, and that goes for almost all manufacturers. This is a silly place for the sprue gate. Here are the accessories for this figure. We'll look at the rifle in a second, but let's start with the map case and the ammo pouches. I talked about the map case before. It's a real nice part. There's nothing to complain about. The ammo pouches are tiny and will also look good after cleaning them up. Please keep this pic in mind. That's what an actual Car 98K looks like.
I went into an alehouse I used to frequent. I told the landlady.
It's just slightly bent and maybe it'll be difficult to tell, but there are some other issues. At first sight the Mauser looks quite nice. Let's start with the cleaning rod. It's too thick, but that wouldn't bother me because I doubt that it can be molded to scale in styrene. Barrel and cleaning rod are thicker at the front than in the area behind the first steel clamp, and that looks very odd. This hole is a bit too large, but the sink marks next to it are the real issue. The same goes for the buttstock. The trigger shape is nicely done, but there's flash again. Up to now I never saw one single trigger on MiniArt rifles without flash. It's very difficult to remove without breaking the trigger. Apart from the buttstock, there isn't much of a seam line. That'll make it easier to clean up this delicate part. Another pick of that sink mark. The right-hand side isn't better. There's even a scratch on the wooden part. I don't know if it's worth it to fill and sand several spots. I guess I'll replace it. The triggers on Tamiya K98Ks are rather square than round, but the rifle itself looks better. Let's take a look at the torch now. When I was with the Bundeswehr, we had the exact same torch, so I know what it should look like. You can choose between white light, a red or green filter, and camouflage light. This part is just great. Look how small it is. Even the short leather strap is nicely done. And now for the gas mask cases. These are the best detailed ones I ever saw in a styrene figure set. There are figure parts that make you pull your hair out, and then there are accessories like these. Incredible. Figure D is the second Feldgendarm wearing a raincoat. He's the one I want to use because I need a figure in this pose. I could just repeat what I said about the previous figure, word for word. And here's the first difference, his right hand and the hatchet. There's a sink mark in the hatchet, and there's also one in his hand. The fingers are nicely done. The seam line is a bit pronounced but easy to remove. Another sink mark, but in this case I'll fill and sand it because this is the first real nice hand of this set. And this is the most important one too. All I could say about these parts has been said before. Here we have the MP40 and it looks very nice. It'll look really good after removing the seam line. Did he forget his finger? Why do there always have to be issues with the triggers? Then we have the magazine pouches and they're really nice. There's nothing negative I could say about them. There's another nice map case. Last figure is the guy on the right of the box illustration, the one who's holding the street sign. There are two hats to choose from, one for the helmet and one for the side cap. What a terrible face this is. You saw this before, so you also know what I think of it. The gorget looks better, although it isn't symmetrical. The buckle is definitely better. And for the last time we see these collar badges. It would have been way better to leave them away than doing them like this. I'd suggest to remove the rear bit of the gunsling and make your own. Nothing new about the arms. Since the hands are molded to the street sign, this part of the arms is flat. We saw something similar in the Tamiya Field Commander set, but there was a locator pin. And here we have sign and hands. The hands look rather nice, but it's beyond me why MiniArt did it this way. No matter to which side of the sign you want to glue the paperwork, the fingers or hands are in the way. And then there are even sink marks on the rear of the sign. The legs are nicely done, the boots aren't. Here are helmet and side cap. The side cap sprue gate sits in the silliest place I can think of. At least it looks much better than the one we saw before. I talked about these items before. And here's one we haven't seen yet, the entrenching tool. Another very nice part. All details are there and appear to be crisp. MiniArt provides us with a couple of street signs and a square pole. To make it short, try to make your own ones from styrene sheet or veneer. And don't forget to make your own pole from wood. They can only look much better than these parts. Chunks of styrene, sink marks, sprue gates around the corner, and so on and on and on. I have no idea why these parts are so poorly done. There's a small sheet of paper with a sprue map and a couple of street signs. The sprue map isn't really necessary, so it doesn't matter that the sprue punched a hole into it. The street signs are nicely done and there aren't any mistakes in the German words. Stuff like this is always useful. The instructions are like Dragon or Tamiya ones. They're easy to follow and include the colors you need for painting the figures. And this is what I like best about the instructions. There are 6 different brands of paints mentioned. Vallejo, Testers, Tamiya, Humbrol, Revell, and Mr. Color. I already mentioned the name of the artist, and this is the guy who sculpted the figures. Maybe MiniArt fans will be mad at me, but I paid for this set and so I say it the way I see it. I could make it short and just tell you not to buy this set. There are enough reasons for that, but let's take a look at these reasons. I can't say anything about the fit of the parts. When it comes to building figures, my experiences with MiniArt are rather good, but I really don't know about these. I should have reviewed this set before the Tamiya Military Field Police set. Maybe you think my review is too harsh, but there was a fresh impression of those wonderfully sculpted figures. I couldn't help but compare the sets. If I take the price into account, I guess you get what you paid for, maybe even less. The Tamiya set was almost twice as expensive. I can't deny that I'm very disappointed again. 40 years ago we would have killed to get figures like these. Maybe even just 20 years ago, but we're all getting used to higher standards. Some of the hands are terribly damaged by excessive flash. I won't try to clean them up. They'll be cut off and replaced with Hornet or other resin hands. That's the moment when you realize that this set wasn't cheap at all. The heads don't come close to the Tamiya ones I just reviewed, but there are worse examples. Maybe some of them will go into the spare parts box. If you want real good looking figures for a dye you spent weeks or even months of work on, these won't be your first choice. They can't be your first choice. Many of the accessories look very nice and that's difficult to understand. Why can't they make figure parts like that? If 2007 is the year of release, some may say that it's an old set, but that's a very lame excuse. I reviewed newer MiniArt sets and all of them had serious flaws. Set number 35-200 US Soldiers at Rest, for example, is from 2015. It was a real disappointment. You'll never find that massive flash on Tamiya figures, not even on the oldest sets available. They just wouldn't deliver sets like this to their customers. I guess it's a matter of quality management, or the lack of it. After all reviews I watched, MiniArt kits appear to be really nice. The one kit I have in my stash confirms it. I wish I could say the same about the figures without reservation. Up to now that wasn't the case. This set is top of the crap. A waste of money, and since I still need 2 of these figures, it's also a waste of time. Final words? Yes. I'm almost sure that this was my last attempt with MiniArt figures. I know that a couple of older figure sets received new tooling, so they hopefully will be better. Nonetheless, I won't buy them before I watch a couple of reviews that prove a better quality.